In this video, we're going to be going over how to create a user login dialog. There's a number of ways to do this, and I've seen a lot of different schemes of people trying to roll their own and or use another piece of built-in piece of authentication, such as TestEnd's user management system. But honestly, Microsoft has put the most time and effort into solving this type of problem. And since it's built into every single Windows machine, the best solution I found is just to integrate with the built-in Microsoft user management. In this tutorial, we'll be going over how to use local user accounts to do this, but the same set of libraries we'll be using can be used for if you have a domain controller, you can link against the domain controller instead, and that will give you centralized user management across multiple machines. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is to get to the local user management, you need to go to the computer management dialog in Windows, then go to local users and groups, and we're going to create a user. And this one we're going to call it operator. I don't typically recommend you have a generic operator account because you really want to be able to link an individual test result back to an actual individual that ran the test. But for now, we're going to use this as a generic operator. Set a password for it, and I'm going to change that so that I don't have to change the password. Press create. And now we have an operator account that we can use. This account is live and they could use it to log into the computer if they needed to. And then let's make a group. Let's do an operators group. Operator. And then we're going to add our operator to the group. I highly recommend that you use groups for access or fine-grained access control versus using individual persons. For instance, you may have an operators group that has basic level access for different test functionality, and then you would have a technicians group for someone that has additional debug capability available. Don't add technicians individually on each machine. It makes it a lot easier to do that. And then if somebody gets demoted from a technician to an operator, you don't have to go back and scrub all the user accounts and all the individual machines. Okay, let's create that group. So now we've got a user and we've got an operator that we can start working with. I've already mocked up the dialog, but we're going to go through how to make it. The main library we're going to be using and interfacing with is the .NET library system.directory services.account management. But I don't want to, for deployment purposes, I don't want to roll this into a .NET DLL, which I then have to deploy, manage, and call. So we will be programming .NET inside LabVIEW. If you've not done this before, yes, it looks a little messy, but the advantage is that these built-in .NET libraries are on pretty much every Windows machine. So if we do it in this way, you don't have any additional code to deploy. You just need the one VI, and then the calls will be out of the GAC. So let's get started. We're going to go to new, and we're going to do a dialog using events to give us our basics. Then the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to swap it from dialog to default so we can debug. Then we need a username dialog, and then we're going to have a password. There's an option inside the string inputs called password display. Put that on there so that the passwords aren't visible. Let's move our buttons up. And then there's a few other controls you'll see I made. We want to have the operator name being passed out, and we need the groups passed out as well. So we're going to go do that. And I'm going to move these off screen. Oops. And then we're going to add error clusters for data flow programming. Okay, and that's our block diagram. Let's save that so we have a good starting point. For now, we're going to wire the error cluster together. And then let's clean this up a little bit. Instead of canceled, we're going to say logged in. And in the OK case, we're going to say true. And we're going to change it from OK to login. And in the cancel case, oops. Change that so we've inverted that logic. Okay, then the first thing we need to do on login is we need to validate the user, which means we have to get the principal context and create an object of that out of the system.diagnostics. I'm sorry, wrong library. System.directory services.account management. Diagnostics is used for something else. And to do this, you select a constructor, then go find system.directory services.account management. And then we're going to be using the principal context. And this is where you get your enum control for the last one. Create a control for this. And this is the context type. The context type we're using in this example is machine, which means look at the local machine. You can do domain, and the behavior is slightly different. I don't have a domain server currently set up to verify the domain functionality with, but I have done that in the past. Okay. And then once we have your principal context, there is this validate credentials VI, which is our next step. So to get to that, you go to your reference, create method, validate credentials. We'll wire these two in. Username, password. And we're going to disconnect that from there so that we can show an error dialog if it didn't actually log in. Let's move that back. Okay, at this point we have two paths. We've either logged in and we want to do additional processing, or we don't have valid credentials and so we want to show an error message and go from there. So if we haven't logged in, let's throw a dialog message. There we go. So if the credentials are not valid, then we tell the user that there's an invalid username or password, and then we keep going. In this case, we will only, if we do it this way, then the stop will only happen if they've got a valid username or password, or if they press the cancel button. Okay, in order to get the groups, we then have to get the user context and then run through a .NET enumerator. I don't understand why it works this way in LabVIEW, but some of the enumerators used in C# are a lot easier to use in C#. When we try and do it use it in LabVIEW, you end up with something like this in order to manually walk through it. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to have to get let's see which one, this one, come on. First we have to get the user principal and then a principal searcher. So, oh, this is the easier way to get it. Again, this is inside system.directory services.account management. We're going to go to user principal, add the context, and then you're going to need to add which name you're using. And that's just your username. And once you have that, we're going to create a principal searcher to go and actually find the groups. There is another way to do this, but it turns out to be a lot slower than just querying on top of this one user object. Okay, principal searcher. Use the find one method. And when you run the find one method, you'll get the first group or set of groups for that object. Or I should say the first principal. And then once you have the principal, you can do the get groups. And then once we get the group, that's an IEnumerable. And so what we want to do is we want to get the enumerator and then use the move next function to get each of the current one. This is kind of frustrating because the C# equivalent is for each. So you just use a for each statement, which is a lot cleaner. Okay, get groups, method, get enumerator. And then once we have the enumerator, we want to run the get next or move next method. And what this does is it grabs the first element in the array. Now, all your users on your Windows account should be inside at least one group, especially if it's a local user account, because they'll be part of everyone. But we still want to check to make sure that it actually has at least one group to operate on. So we'll create a case structure there. And then we're going to get the current one. And then once you have the current object, you can grab the name out of the principal. And then I'm going to put this in a while loop to iterate through the collection. We will enable indexing. And we're going to close. Make sure we do some cleanup. It's a wise idea to close these references when you're done with them. The .NET garbage collector will help you out somewhat, but when you do some of these things, it's not always consistent. So we want to avoid a memory leak if possible. And we'll just move that over there. I'm also going to flip the while loop, so it's going to continue while true. Then we're going to feed out the groups to there. And we're going to feed out the operator name. And then one of the other things I did is I'm not too particular about if I get like an authentication error, i.e. if the domain server is down and it can't authenticate to it, then I just want to tell the operator that something's gone wrong and then clear it. So we'll add that at the very end. You could bake additional error handling in here if you wanted to. Let's close this off. Okay. Let's save that VI, press go. Operator password is cleared out. Put the password in, it's in password mode, press OK. It authenticated, so the operator coming out is operator, and the groups it's a member of are group operators and users. And that's how you integrate LabVIEW with Windows user management. The last thing you should probably do after you write this VI is flip it back from debug to dialog so that it becomes modal and pops up like that. Well, let's resize it. Don't mind my OCD. There we go. Yep, it's all good.